Turn up the glide a little bit. Maybe I'll play with taking the pitch down. Hey, what's going on? I'm Jamie Blake, and in this video, I'll be showing you all the fundamentals and everything you need to know about how to use I Wish, which is a very unique plugin from Polyverse Music. It's both a granular note freezer and a real-time wavetable synthesizer, depending on how you use it. First, I'm going to show you how you set up the routing inside of Ableton Live. So I have an audio track here with some audio clips on it. What I'm going to do is add the I Wish plugin to this audio track. All right, now to send MIDI into this plugin, I need to create a second track and route the MIDI into the input of I Wish on this audio track. For my own reasons, I'm going to put it just before the audio track and rename this I Wish MIDI. And then if I open up the I/O, I'm going to send the MIDI to, this track is called Synth Drone because that was the first clip that I put on it. And you can see just below it, underneath Synth Drone, which is the name of the track, it says One I Wish, which is exactly what I want. All right, so now I'm just going to create a MIDI clip real fast. Before I take a listen to what this sounds like, I want to just first show you the source material that I'm working with. Just a short loop of a reverse guitar sound. All right, so now I'm going to turn on I Wish, and I'm going to click play on this MIDI clip. And you can hear now it sounds like chords using small samples that it's taking from the audio and then it's looping them. So the first two controls that I want to go over with I Wish are right here at the top. These are the loop controls. And you have pitch and formant. Now pitch controls the length of the loop. So if you increase it, the pitch is going to go up. So that's a shorter loop. If you decrease it, it's a longer loop, meaning the pitch will be lower. Second, you've got the formant controls, which affects the playback speed of the audio inside of the loop. Now, if you hit this button right in between pitch and formant, this is the link button. So this is kind of the same effect that you'd get on a tape machine. Just have a quick listen to what that sounds like. And the cool thing about this plugin is if you hold shift while you're adjusting a parameter, you could go into fine tune mode. So if I hold shift and I drag the pitch, you could see on the semitones below, it now goes into 1.72, 1.51. So you can fine tune that. And this is especially useful with like the LFO, which I'm going to go over shortly. Okay, so I'm going to unlink these and maybe I'll set this pitch up an octave, so up 12 semitones. So next we've got the crossfade, and this is a crossfade from within inside the loop that is being generated from the little chunks of audio that are being frozen and then looped by I Wish. So let's take a listen to what that sounds like when I adjust the crossfade. You can hear it's a lot softer when the crossfade's at 100%. And it's a lot brighter when the crossfade is at a lower value. So next I'm going to talk about the amp controls. There's the attack, the release, and then the dry wet. So the attack controls the fade in applied to the wet signal. So let's adjust the attack time and take a listen to what that sounds like. So you can hear it really slow values like that you're actually hearing a bit of the original signal before it's being processed through I Wish. So next I'm going to adjust the release time and take a listen to how the process signal decays out with shorter and longer release times. So you can hear with a longer release time, it almost blends over the next time that MIDI notes are triggering I wish. One thing I want to point out about the amp controls, if I put the wet at 100%, there will be no dry signal for you to hear. So take a listen to that. So as you can hear, it's all just the affected signal and none of the dry signal. Conversely, if I take the dry wet way down, you'll hear more of the dry unaffected audio and less of the processed audio. Okay, so next I'm going to go over the LFO and the different controls for the LFO. So the LFO section is right here, and there are a few controls to go over. First, you have this kind of split Y looking shape here, and that represents the fade value. So if you hover your mouse over it, you can see the outline of it get highlighted. And if you drag your mouse to the left or right, you can see the value change in terms of milliseconds. So to hear what this is doing, let's apply this to the pitch. So you can grab this green slider here, this green dot. Take a listen to what this is doing to the pitch. And you can hear the LFO waits a little bit before it actually kicks in, and that's because of this fade time. So listen as I shorten the fade time and lengthen the fade time to how that affects when the LFO actually kicks in and starts modulating the pitch. So now I'm going to change the rate and come up with a nice vibrato sound, something that sounds kind of natural, kind of wavy, and get something that I like. So to change the rate of the LFO, if you hover your mouse over the shape right here, it's currently set to a sine wave. It becomes highlighted and you see the text rate show up next to the mouse cursor. And if you drag that to the right, it will slow down the rate. If you drag it to the left, it will speed up the rate. So let's listen to this with a little bit slower of a rate time. So next I'm going to click this tempo button so that the LFO is not locked into the tempo of my track and it moves in values of hertz. So I'm going to turn that off, dial in the speed to a vibrato I like, and then adjust the fade in time. So I like the speed of the LFO now, but now I'm going to fine tune the amount of modulation being sent to the pitch so that it's not such an extreme amount of pitch modulation. So to use a technique that I mentioned earlier, I'm going to hold shift while I adjust the value of the pitch modulation so that I can fine tune exactly how much the pitch is being modulated. All right, so of course, within the LFO settings, you have options of what kind of shape you would like the modulation to be. So to take a listen to those, I'm going to send some of the LFO to the formant and modulate that at a more extreme setting and take a listen to how the different shapes affect the sound. Okay, one more thing about the LFO controls before I move on to the envelope modulation controls is that if you press this button right here, you can enable or disable re-triggering. So what that means is every time a MIDI note is received or MIDI information is received, it will reset every time a new note comes in. So moving on to the envelope controls. It just has kind of a simplified, streamlined set of controls. So it has delay, curve, and decay. So the delay is how long the envelope waits to kick in after a MIDI note is received. The curve is just the slope, the shape of the envelope. And then the decay is how long it takes for this modulation to reach its new value. To show you an example of this, if I take the pitch, let's take it down 12 semitones, so down an octave. And then just to hear it right away, I'm going to make the delay instant, and then I'll just leave the decay as is. And this is going to sound kind of funky, but I just want to show you how the envelope works and what it's doing. And then we'll fine tune it and make it sound a little more usable. So now I'm going to adjust the delay so that the sound can come in at its original pitch, wait a little bit of time, and then drop down an octave. All right, so that sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll also send this to the formant controls and see what kind of sounds I can come up with. And before I move on, I'm actually going to turn down the amount of modulation on the formant from the LFO because it's kind of getting distracting to me. Okay, so next I'm going to go over the global controls for I Wish. So right off the bat, we have poly, and this is in reference to the polyphony, or how many notes can be played simultaneously. So right now, by default, it's set to 8, but if I set this down to, say, 2, you will only hear 2 notes of the chord that I played. And if I set it down to 1, you're only going to hear 1 note that is played. And a unique thing, an important thing to distinguish, there are 2 different modes when you're only playing 1 note at a time. There's mono and then there's legato. And in mono, there's a glide that happens no matter what when you transition from a higher note to a lower note or vice versa. In legato, this glide only happens when the notes overlap. All right, so I'm going to set the polyphony back to 8, which is where I had it. So next we have the glide control, and this is just a standard glide control that you'd expect to hear or see in any soft synth or hardware synth. So if I turn this up, as it moves from the first chord to the second chord, you'll hear a pitch bend. All right, so you can hear that nice, beautiful glide sound we all know and love. The next global control is delay, and this is particularly useful if you have transients that you want to pass through the plugin. So I'm actually going to switch the sound source that I'm using over to this water sample, and then adjust the delay so you can hear some of the water sample come through before it starts processing the sound. So you can hear at the start of each of the chords that are triggering the plugin that we're actually hearing a bit of the sound pop through before the loop starts cycling. A cool thing about this knob is if you turn it all the way up or all the way to the right, it goes into what's called pitch mode, which will adjust the delay time based on the note's wavelength. This is especially useful if you are playing live with this, and you could see when it's all the way up, it now says pitch. Well, I'm going to put that back down to 0 where I had it initially. All right, so lastly, on the bottom right side of the plugin, we have the pitch wheel up and down, and this just allows you to adjust the range of how far the pitch bend will go up and down. So I could drag this up and drag this down, and now if I hit play and then use this pitch slider on the push. So lastly, I wanted to go over how you can control these parameters using a MIDI controller or MIDI CC. So if you right click on a parameter, you can say detect MIDI CC, and when you do that, twist a knob on your MIDI controller. It will then be assigned to and control that parameter. You could also just manually assign the MIDI CC. You can just set the value right here. And then you have set rotary movement and set vertical movement. Now, vertical movement is more of the traditional, like what most plugins will use when you're controlling a value, where you just drag straight up and down to adjust it. But I've really grown to like the rotary movement, especially because if I want to adjust the formant here, if I click and hold, if I hold shift and move my mouse way out to the side like this, you'll see how when I move my mouse, it makes steps in really small increments versus when my mouse is closer to the knob and I move around in a circle, it moves or it changes the values much faster. It's definitely worth trying and playing around with and seeing what works better for you. So last, I'm just gonna have a little bit of fun with this sound that we have and see if I could generate something really interesting just using all the controls that we went over. So I'm gonna make a slightly different version of this MIDI clip. I'm gonna hit play on this. Now I'm gonna adjust the attack time to be a little quicker. Maybe take the formant down. And then increase the release time. Turn up the glide a little bit. Maybe I'll play with taking the pitch down. Now you can hear some really interesting interplay between the dry, unaffected signal and the wet, affected signal that's being processed inside of I Wish. So the sound design capabilities of this plugin and the creative capabilities are obviously huge. So I really encourage you to experiment with this plugin and see what kind of cool sounds you can come up with. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment. Let us know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. And for more information about I Wish and Polyverse other plugins, please check the link down below. Thanks again for watching. Until next time.